immediately clear whether Khadija Ahmadzada left prison. Since seizing power in Afghanistan in August 2021, several Afghan women athletes have either gone underground or fled the country. Women-only gyms have been shut, and they are also not allowed to exercise in public parks.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News.
Read for deep.
The African perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, CAF fines Algeria for unruly behaviour at the AFCON tournament. And we'll tell you all about the action on day 5 of the Australian Open. Details at 12:30.
This is Africa Update, your pulse to the continent. Stories shaping nations and voices driving change. Stay informed, stay connected, right here on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is 12:06 Central African time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa on STV's audio channel 802, OpenView channel 628, and on www.channelafrica.co.za, as well as on the SABC Plus app, available on the Apple and Google Play stores. Join us, as well as you being able to download the Channel Africa app on the Google and Apple Play stores. Now join us in conversation on our social media platforms. That's on X, Instagram, and subscribe on YouTube at Channel Africa 1. On Facebook at Channel Africa. You can also send us your comments and voice notes to +2763 at 406 9126 #Africa Updates, and let us know which country you're in. And if you have any stories that you'd like us to highlight or to focus on, send us an email. It is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or give us a call on +2783 288 6684.
Africa Update on Channel Africa.
Today on #Africa Update asks, the African Union is moving closer to restoring Guinea's membership nearly 4 years after suspending the country following a military coup. Now, we want to know, do you think this is a good move for the AU and the country of Guinea? Share your thoughts and your views on all our social media platforms. That's on X, Instagram at Channel Africa 1, on Facebook at Channel Africa. You can also send us your comments and voice notes on +2783 288 6684. #Africa Update Us.
Nkhanza zokhudza amuna ndi azimayi kapena kuti gender-based violence, GBV, zikuwononga miyoyo komanso kuphwasula midzi. Zikuchitika m'manyumba, m'masukulu, malo ogwirira ntchito, ndipo kwambiri mwakachetechete. Koma sizikuyenera kupitirira. Mukazimva, yankhulani. Ngati mwakhuzidwa, funani chithandizo. Chifukwa kusachita chilichonse sikuthandiza. Mverani kuma wireless onse 14 a SABC kuchokera lachitatu pa 23 mwezi uno wa Julai kuti mumve zokambirana, malangizo, masewero, zionetsero za maphunziro ndi mafunzo okhuza nkhanza za amuna ndi azimayi ndi akatswiri, anthu opulumuka ku nkhanzazi, okhazikitsa lamulo, komanso dziko lonse lokhuzidwa ndi nkhanzazi. Zonsezi pa wireless yomwe mumayikonda ya SABC. Imbirani pa nambala 0800 428 428 kuti munene za nkhanzazi kapena kupeza chithandizo. Nkhanza zokhuza amuna ndi azimayi zimatha ndi inu. Uthenga ukufikani kuchokera ku SABC.
Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
Now, the leader of South Africa's economic freedom fighters, Julius Malema, is appearing before the East London Magistrates Court for the pre-sentencing proceedings following his conviction of discharging a firearm during the party's 5th anniversary celebrations held in Mdantsane, a township in the Eastern Cape province, back in 2018. Our supporters held a night vigil for Malema. His conviction includes the unlawful possession of a firearm and ammunition, discharging a firearm in a built-up area, and reckless endangerment. EFF supporters say they will make South Africa ungovernable if he is sent to jail. And just to point out, this appearance has been moved to the East London High Court due to space issues. Now, to discuss this further, we are joined on the line by a legal expert at Melusi Ulu. Melusi, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update.
Good afternoon, Lulu, and to the viewers and listeners at home. Thank you for having me.
Now, Melusi, what exactly are pre-sentencing proceedings, and what happens at this stage, and why would the court order pre-sentencing reports in a case like this?
Okay, remember, before the magistrate gives a sentence, she needs to hear what the defense will say on the sentence and what the prosecution will say on the sentence. So the prosecution gives aggravating factors and the defense gives mitigating factors, which will allow the court to make a decision whether the sentence is not going to be a harsh sentence. But there are also certain instances where you get a pre-sentence report from maybe a social worker or a probation officer from correctional services, where they look at the circumstances of the accused, his history and his behavior, and perhaps maybe what they'll propose as the sentence in the case. But obviously the challenge in this one is that the minimum sentence that I looked at for possession of an unlicensed firearm is 15 years. So that's what will happen. And one of the cases I like to refer to in this case is an old case. It's S versus Zane, 1969. And it says when there's a sentence, there are three things we look at. We look at the circumstances of the accused, we look at the seriousness of the offense, and we look at the interest of the society as well. So the pre-sentence hearing, the prosecution will give their view why they say the sentence should be this particular sentence, and the defense will do that as well. I saw that Advocate Ngogaitobi is there, but I don't think he's the one doing the matter right now. I think possibly he's just there to see whether, when they want to appeal, what was happening in the case. So it's a very interesting case from a political standpoint and a legal standpoint as well.
And just for interest's sake, what would a magistrate or a court judge look at in terms of, mitigating circumstances or aggravating circumstances? How do they look at it in general? What would count in Malema's favor, for instance? Yeah.
Obviously, the case I mentioned, it covers both instances, aggravating and mitigating. So a magistrate for aggravating circumstances, they would look at, remember he's already convicted. So now it's the discretion of the magistrate to give a sentence that she will give. So for aggravating circumstances, look at the fact that the firearm was possessed unlawfully. Secondly, there was a shootout in public, so there's reckless endangerment for persons who were there, and there's also possession of ammunition. So if you look at the sentence in Section 121 of the Firearms Control Act, they take it to a column that says the minimum sentence should be 15 years for possession of unlicensed firearms. So you can see it's going to be a very tough decision for the magistrate to make on the aggravating circumstances in that the minimum sentence is 15 years. So she has to deviate from 15 years, maybe give 6 years or so. So it's a very tough decision. But on the mitigating factors, which is what I'm mostly used to, you give the personal circumstances as well, whether he has children, is married, and whether he works, how much he earns, and why it should. I'll think, will argue why it's in the interest of justice, maybe for him not to get an imprisonment sentence, but rather get a sentence of maybe, for the sake of being a member of the parliament, maybe get a sentence of below 12 months with a fine. I think that's what they'll push more than anything, so that he can continue to be a member of parliament. Of course, you will say he's a first offender. We like to do that as a Senate and say, Your Worship, my client is a first offender, so can you give him a sentence that is light because it's the first time he's found to be in the wrong position in terms of the law. So that's what you're looking at. For aggravating, they want a harsher sentence. For mitigation, they want a less harsher sentence.
And, could the court impose additional conditions such as firearm bans or community service or anything of the sort?
Okay, the first thing the court will also determine in terms of Section 103 is whether his license, if he has a license or he wants to apply for a license, should that be suspended? They will have to argue on that as well. And then secondly, in terms of correctional services, maybe arrest, if I would say like that, they can also say he must report to a correctional officer and maybe every Friday and be part of that program. So maybe that one might assist him so he can continue to be outside and do his job. But it will depend on the arguments that are made by the defense to avoid him being in prison, inside prison, because I think that's the worst case scenario. And politically, from an unrest point of view, there's something that we would not want, but at the same time, everyone should be equal in the eyes of the law.
What impact could this conviction have on Malema's political career?
All right. If you go to Section 47, subsection 1 of paragraph E of the Constitution, remember it was argued during the Zuma situation when he wanted to be a member of the parliament after the MK won certain votes to be in the parliament. The argument there is, or the issue is, if you have a 12 months, beyond 12 months imprisonment as a member of the parliament, you are disqualified without a fine as well. You are disqualified to be a member of the parliament. So now the EFF will be in a situation where they will have to choose a new leader in the parliament so that they can continue with their work. That is why, Lulu, I'm thinking this matter is going beyond regional courts. I see him, whatever sentence he gets, even if it's something that he would appreciate from a political standpoint, where he gets a 12 months imprisonment or an option of a fine, I still see him taking this matter to higher court. That is why you are seeing Toby behind the scenes, because that is the next step. So the process of sentencing, for me, I think it's just a process, but that's not where Malema's team is looking at. They are looking at high court and they want to appeal the conviction and the sentence.
And I was actually going to come to a question about the appealing process, because now he's already been, found guilty. And what does it mean in terms of the appeals process, for them to even go to the highest court in the land?
Yeah. So basically, when the matter is from regional courts, which is where we are, the next step is to go to high courts if you want to appeal or review. But I think mostly it's going to be based on appeal. So when he's appealing, he's going to appeal, I believe. You can appeal on a sentence, but I think he's going to appeal on a conviction and a sentence. The reason why I'm saying that, if you remember, his reasoning was he was not carrying a firearm, but he was carrying a toy. I think he's going to try and bring that on the appeal process and say he was wrongly convicted and he was also wrongly sentenced. So I don't see him accepting the conviction, even the sentence. I see him going beyond this and appealing. I think what will be important, if you give me a second, is the fact that I think the leadership of EFF must be able to make the large crowd of supporters of Malema to be aware of the process, so at least they don't get a misunderstanding and end up, having a July situation that we had several years ago when Mr. Zuma was sentenced. I think that will be very important so that they can understand that there's a process, a sentence can be appealed, but we don't know whether he will succeed on appeal or not. It will depend on the merits that he brings there on conviction and sentence appeal.
And just very quickly in wrapping up, what message does this case send about accountability for political leaders? And does this ruling set any precedent for similar firearm-related cases?
Yes, for political leaders, I think the important thing is in Section 9, we always say our quality clause says everyone is equal before the eyes of the law. So he also has a right to challenge like every other citizen, but also if he's convicted, obviously he's convicted like every other citizen. So despite the fact that he's a political leader, but the political optics and the influence, unfortunately, they do affect situations like it happened in the July Unrest in 2021. But I think for general knowledge, it's going to assist people to understand. For instance, many people were not aware that being in possession of a firearm which is unlicensed can be a minimum of 15 years, which will make people to be aware that at least if you have a firearm, not to say with Malema, if it continues to appeal, that's what happened, but I'm saying generally, if you do have a firearm that is unlicensed, it's a very serious offense, or having ammunition. So it's going to teach people to be aware about these types of offenses at a general level.
Melusi, thank you for your time on Africa Update. It's been a pleasure. That was legal expert Melusi Gaboo ending that discussion.
Madapiri bazoshitika. Madapiri bazoshitika.
Madotolo oposa 1,500 amene amagwira ntchito yaulere mu zipatala zaboma mdziko la Zambia azanyanyala ntchito lachisanu sabata ya mawa ndipo Daniel Shabanda kutambasula nkhani.
Madotolo oposa 1,500 amene amagwira ntchito mopanda malipiro apamwezi dziko la Zambia akuyembekezera kuyamba kunyanyala ntchito. Ichi ndi chifukwa chakuti boma lalephera walemba ntchito monga mmene lidawalonjezera. Channel Africa News yalankhulana ndi mkulu wa bungwe la madotolo la Resident Doctors Association of Zambia, Dr. Paul Chiwe, akugomeza kuti madotolo ambiri amene akugwira ntchito mu zipatala zaboma akugwira ntchito yaulere ndipo ali ndi chiyembekezo chakuti tsiku lina alembedwa ntchito ndi boma.
Zochitika pa nthawi ya 6 koloko kufikira 7 koloko madzulo. Lolemba mpaka lachisanu ndi Madapiri.
Africa Update, your daily dose of African insights with Lulu Gaboo on Channel Africa.
It is 22 after 12 Central African time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa. The African Union is moving closer to restoring Guinea's membership nearly 4 years after suspending the country following a military coup. At a meeting in Addis Ababa, AU Commission Chairperson Mahmoud Ali Yusuf recommended lifting the suspension, saying Guinea has reached a key milestone in its political transition with a new constitution and presidential elections. And for more on this, we are joined on the line by Beverly Ochieng, a senior analyst at Control Risk. Beverly, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on Africa Update. Beverly, are you there? All right, we'll try and get Beverly on the line so she can unpack this for us and what it means for the people of Guinea in terms of this move that Guinea's membership should be restored and Guinea be re-enter, I guess, for lack of a better word, the African Union. Beverly, are you there? Beverly? All right, we seem to be having some network issue there. We will try and get it on the line as this is a very key discussion that we're looking forward to. That's Beverly Ochieng, a senior analyst at Control Risk, and hopefully we'll be able to have this conversation before the end of the show today. It is 24 after 12 Central African time.
60 years of stories, sounds, and spirits. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África, com Moreno Samo e João Yabalá.
A situação do ativista angolano Serrote José de Oliveira, preso desde julho, tem gerado grande preocupação internacional. Conhecido como General Nila e presidente do movimento União Nacional para a Total Revolução de Angola, Serrote iniciou uma greve de fome em protesto contra a sua prisão, que considera arbitrária. De acordo com a Amnistia Internacional, o estado de saúde do ativista está a deteriorar-se rapidamente devido à falta de acesso a cuidados médicos adequados. Para discutir o impacto deste caso e o estado da liberdade política em Angola, vamos conversar com Dito Dale, ativista e defensor dos direitos humanos.
Nós estamos diante de uma clara estratégia de aniquilar o jovem, porque quando uma pessoa está doente, deve ser assistida. Ao não proporcionar esses cuidados médicos, o que é que o regime quer? Não quer que esse jovem saia livre e com vida da prisão, quer matá-lo.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio de Canal África.
Right, Beverly.
Africa Update on Channel Africa.
All right, so we have Beverly on the line again. Beverly, are you here?
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay,
Lulu.
great stuff. Okay, I'm so happy that we have you on the line here. Beverly, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on Africa Update. How significant is the AU's recommendation to lift Guinea's suspension at this stage?
I mean, at this point, it's still quite symbolic, but then it will allow Guinea to be reintegrated in the African Union, to take part or be represented in African Union meetings, mechanisms after a 4-year absence after the military coup in 2021. So Guinea would be able to weigh in on continental, regional decisions, giving its president, Colonel Doumbouya, more political leverage. And on the economic front, Guinea will likely be looking to use its membership in the AU, in the G20 as well, to continue attracting commercial investments, especially as it has critical supplies and it is facing lots of socioeconomic pressures back home.
And what does the AU mean by, in inverted commas, a decisive milestone in Guinea's political transition?
I mean, for the African Union, the fact that Guinea did hold an election, the presidential election that took place in December, means that this marks the end of it being under a junta interim government to a more elected democratic government, even though there have been disputes from the opposition around the conduct of that election. The result was quite decisive, with Doumbouya getting more than 70% of the vote. It is a symbolic change, him moving from just being a leader of a junta to being a president, which means that they can politically re-engage with him. And for the most part, we have seen that the biggest pressure point for countries under military-led government is a constitutional handover of power. In many instances, we find that it's the military leaders themselves who are coming into power.
And what concerns remain about military leaders contesting and winning elections in Guinea?
Yeah, so the trouble has been that regional continental bodies have struggled to effectively avert a scenario where those who seize power illegitimately through a coup then go ahead to lead the democratic transition. We've seen that not just in Guinea, but even in Chad, in Gabon, in Sudan, and then now, of course, with Guinea again. And that these leaders will disguise themselves as being institutional change, but they are still the people who did seize power previously. Military interventions, we see, will be a prevailing threat in various countries, especially when coup conditions seem quite rife. So whether they're insurgencies, where armies are aggrieved by insufficient support by their respective governments, whether there's perceptions of mismanagement of government, we may see military leaders continuing to be a mainstay in some places and then using that position to put themselves in power through elections.
And could this set a precedent for how the AU handles future coups on the African continent? And if the suspension is lifted, what should the AU do to ensure reforms are sustained?
I mean, the AU will probably continue to handle most coups in this way. So we are well beyond precedent. Elections will be seen as a primary milestone through which the AU measures the legitimacy of an African government, even when those elections are disputed. With the African Union, of course, there's issues around even its own institutional reforms to be able to engage both with governments that are still under military rule, especially where it poses security or wider political threats. there's a rethinking of mechanisms internally on how do you engage these governments without giving them way too much legitimacy, and how do you still empower institutions within the country to ensure that they have the capacity to participate democratically in a post-transition environment.
And despite these developments, what are the main governance challenges Guinea still faces?
Well, one, socioeconomic grievances have remained high since the military came into power. There have been some protests over the state of the cost of living, electricity outages, infrastructure deficiencies. The government is definitely going to be facing a lot of pressure to address these, to avert such grievances. There will be political participation, particularly by the opposition leaders who are either in exile, people who have been arrested, and whether they will be facing any due process or a dialogue process. But the big thing for Doumbouya at the moment is his flagship project, Simandu, the iron ore project, which did carry out its very inaugural exports just before the election took place, and using this to be able to address infrastructure gaps. So attracting investment into the country, making sure that there's skills transfer for people to have opportunities to actually be real stakeholders as the mining sector expands in the coming years.
Well, Beverly, thank you so much for joining us on Africa Update. We are going to leave it there for today. That was Beverly Ochieng, a senior analyst at Control Risks, joining us on the line. It is 12:30 and our news up next.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Lulu. The African Union is moving closer to restoring Guinea's membership, this nearly 4 years after suspending the country following a military coup. The Director General of the Africa Centre for Disease Control and Prevention, Africa CDC, is warning of the possibility of a cholera outbreak in Mozambique following recent floods in the country. An Indonesian court has convicted and sentenced two prominent journalists to 3.5 years in prison on tax evasion charges. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsintsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective. Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
And it's a very good afternoon from the sports desk. I am Mosibu Dimakura with your latest sports news at the Sawa. So the Algerian Football Federation have announced that the disciplinary committee at the Confederation of African Football CAF has imposed sanctions on the Algerian national team as well as the federation regarding the quarter-final match against Nigeria at the 2025 Africa Cup of Nations tournament in Morocco. So Algeria were eliminated from the tournament after their 2-0 defeat to Nigeria in the quarterfinals. Lucas Zidane, the goalkeeper, suspended for 2 matches to be served now during the 2027 AFCON qualifiers. Meanwhile, Rafik Boulali, the defender of the Algerian side, has been suspended for 4 matches, with 2 matches suspended, having now to serve those 2 suspensions during the upcoming 2027 AFCON qualifiers. Meanwhile, $5,000 fine has also been imposed for inappropriate behavior following 4 players receiving yellow cards. At the same time, $25,000 fine has been imposed for misconduct by some players as well as officials after the match, which negatively affected the image of the game. At the same time, a $5,000 fine also has been imposed for the use of flares by the fans. At the same time, the FA has been fined $5,000 for throwing objects by fans, $10,000 fine for breaching security procedures as some fans attempted to cross barriers, while $50,000 has also been imposed for the offensive gestures by the fans, including waving banknotes towards match officials. Now, the Algerian Football Federation stated in an official announcement that it has immediately initiated an appeal procedure allowed under the applicable regulations, this to challenge these sanctions imposed by the Confederation of African Football. The federation also added that it concludes to monitor the matter with the utmost attention and also reaffirms its intention now to defending the interest of Algerian football within strict respect for regulatory as well as institutional frameworks. On to some cricket news now. South Africa's men's batter Tony Dazorzi, as well as momentum multiplier Titans batter Donovan Ferreira, have been ruled out of the upcoming 3-match T20 international series against the West Indies, as well as the ICC Men's T20 World Cup in 2026 that is due to take place in India, as well as Sri Lanka due to injury. Dazorzi has not progressed as expected in his rehabilitation from a right hamstring muscle tear he sustained during the one-day international series against India in December of 2025. Ferreira, meanwhile, sustained a fracture to his left cassavel during the Betway SA20 tournament. Proteas head coach Shukri Conrad had this to say about having to replace these players ahead of the T20 World Cup.
But I think the really good thing is that we've got players of the caliber of Stubbo and Ryan, who steps into their shoes. So yeah, look, always disappointing when you lose players to an original squad. But like I mentioned, the quality of players that we've got as replacements, that's rather satisfying and gratifying to know as a coach.
Conrad also confirmed that David Miller, who suffered an abductor muscle injury on Monday while playing for the Paarl Royals in the SA20 competition, will play no part in the T20 series as a precautionary measure.
Yes. Look, I mean, we basically pulled David out of the West Indies tour as a precautionary measure. He had a follow-up scan this morning again, which was very positive from our front. I reckon by the time we get to Pretoria for the second T20, I think obviously the medical team would set certain benchmarks to what he's got to reach, and everybody is very optimistic that David will meet all of that. I'm very optimistic that David will be on a flight to the World Cup.
All right, let's conclude with some tennis news now. Play will start 30 minutes earlier at the Australian Open on Saturday, with temperatures set to reach 40 degrees Celsius in Melbourne. Play will begin on all courts at 10:30 a.m. local time instead of the usual 11 a.m. start. Now, the Australian Bureau of Meteorology has issued a severe heatwave warning in Melbourne and the state of Victoria. Play will be suspended at the Australian Open if the tournament's heat stress scale hits the maximum of 5. Now, the scale measures 4 factors, including the radiant heat, air temperature in the shade, relative humidity, as well as wind speed. So if the 5 is recorded on the heat stress scale, matches on the Rod Laver Arena, the Margaret Court Arena, as well as the John Cain Arena will stop to allow the roof to be closed before play can continue. It is 12:37 p.m. Central African time, and that's a wrap of your sports news this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, do send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Call us as well on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news with the Upside team in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibu Di Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Channel Africa is moving with the times, and so is our WhatsApp line. We've changed our WhatsApp number, making it even easier for you to stay connected. Send us your voice notes, comments, shout outs, and song requests to our new WhatsApp number, +27 83 288 6684. That's +27 83 288 6684. Save it, share it, and stay in the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As climate change continues to disrupt weather patterns and place increasing strain on economies across Africa, the mining sector is under growing pressure to adapt. Organizers of this year's Mining Indaba say the focus is firmly on how Africa's mining industry can reduce its carbon footprint while remaining competitive and attractive to global investors. Principal Climate Sustainability Gerard Boltes shares his views on how Africa's mining sector can reduce its carbon footprint while remaining competitive.
There is no single blueprint for decarbonizing Africa's mining sector, but a structured and disciplined approach is essential. The first and most cost-effective step is demand-side energy reduction through efficiency and optimization. Simple interventions like fixing compressed air leaks, optimizing haul route planning, and improving ventilation efficiency cut both energy use and operational cost, delivering the highest impact and lowest cost.
Central African leaders have ordered urgent fiscal and monetary measures to steady the region's weakening economies. This includes repatriation of state assets and export revenues held abroad. The 6 leaders agreed to immediately implement the return of export revenues with priority on companies in the extractive sector. In other news, Nigerian President Bola Tinubu has approved targeted investment-linked incentives for Shell's Bonga Southwest Deepwater Oil Project following a meeting with the company's chief executive. The proposed incentives are the latest in a raft of regulatory reforms in Africa's top crude oil producer as it looks to attract investment to boost oil and gas production. In a statement, the president's office said that the incentives are not blanket concessions. It says they will be ring-fenced and focused on new capital, incremental production, and strong local content delivery. Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana says South Africa will just take a break from participation in the G20 this year under the U.S. presidency and will only resume full participation next year. Godongwana told a media briefing at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, that South Africa's influence on G20 issues will continue despite the country being blocked from all G20 participation under the U.S. presidency this year. Godongwana says the U.S. is not willing to accredit South African delegations.
What we do know is that South Africa is on leave in 2026. Not because the Americans can chase us out of the G20, but they hold an important instrument, the accreditation. If you don't have the accreditation, you can't get into the venue, even if you're around. So we must take this that is purely a temporal setback for 2026. 2027, I don't think the president is going to be the UK. I doubt if the UK will take a similar posture.
The European Union has said it will defend itself against coercion after U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew his threat to levy tariffs on U.S. allies who opposed his plan to take over Greenland. Speaking after an emergency meeting of the bloc's leaders, the European Council President Antonio Costa said the EU will not be pushed around.
The goal remains the effective stabilization of the trade relations between the European Union and the United States. At the same time, the European Union will continue to stand up for its interests and will defend itself, its member states, its citizens and its companies against any form of coercion.
In the markets, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,420 naira, Botswana 13 pula 20, Kenya 128 shilling 29, Zambia 19 kwacha 97. BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is at 5 real 307, Russia 72 rubles 22, India 91 rupee 58, China 71.97, South Africa 16 rand 20 cents. $1 is 74 pence to the British pound, 85 to the euro. Commodities, gold is trading at $4,914, platinum at $2,634 per ounce, the price of Brent crude oil at $64.65 a barrel. That's all for now. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or you can call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Chanduko Ligege.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
9 to 12 midday, Central African Time. On the move with Palisa Tau and Benjamin Mushatama.
Now, when you go to the hospital, there's medical attention that you need, and that's the only experience you're expecting to have. If you are a transgender person, sometimes those experiences can be marred by the demand of trying to understand your gender, your sexuality, and not particularly getting the assistance that you need.
One time, I was sexually abused by someone who used to live next door to my house. So when I went to the police to report, I was in a weave, I was wearing a dress, and when I got there, the police person that helped me said to me, obviously we're gonna rape you because why do you walk around looking like trying to be a woman when you are a man? And after that, the person just walked scot-free.
How do you deal with that? Because there's a double barrel abuse there. So it's not even double barrel, there's kind of multi-dimensional forms of abuse.
I think one thing that I will tell you about trans people is we are strong, not because we want to be strong, but because we don't have an option. It is what it is. Because the struggles that we face each and every day are like unimaginable.
Keeping you on the know and on the move. Your window to the continent and beyond. Africa Update. Only on Channel Africa. Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
It is 12:45 Central African Time, and we're coming to you live from Johannesburg in South Africa on DSTV's Audio Bouquet Channel 802, OpenView Channel 628, and on www.channelafrica.co.za, as well as on the SABC Plus app. We are on all the different social media platforms. You can get a hold of us on Channel Africa 1, that's on X and Instagram, Channel Africa on Facebook. You can send us your comments and voice notes on +2783 288 6684.
Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
Our U.S. President Donald Trump launched his Board of Peace from the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. The organization was initially designed to cement Gaza's Hamas ceasefire and was endorsed by a United Nations Security Council resolution. Trump invited dozens of world leaders to join his Board of Peace initiative to address global conflicts, raising concerns among diplomats about its impact on the United Nations. Reuters' Alex Cohen has more.
Well, this is a very exciting day.
U.S. President Donald Trump launched his Board of Peace from the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. The organization was initially designed to cement Gaza's rocky ceasefire and was endorsed by a United Nations Security Council resolution as part of Trump's Gaza peace plan. Trump, who will chair the board, says he thinks it will eventually tackle conflicts worldwide. Board members also include U.S. Gaza negotiators Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, and former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. Leaders from around the world have signed up to participate. Those joining include Turkey and Saudi Arabia, while traditional Western U.S. allies have been more cautious. Trump said permanent members must help fund the board with a $1 billion payment. France said it will not join the Board of Peace for now because its charter does not correspond with the UN resolution to resolve the war in Gaza, and some of the charter's elements were contrary to the UN charter. The decision by France and other nations not to sign up comes as no surprise to Yossi Meckelberg, Senior Consulting Fellow, Middle East and North Africa Program at Chatham House.
And if this Board of Peace, is it going to rival the United Nations? Is it about sidelining the norms created after 1945? Based, as expressed in the UN Charter, in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Geneva Convention. So I'm, for one, not surprised that countries that believe in norms-based, rule-based world order are very wary of joining such a body.
UN Deputy Spokesperson Farhan Haq was asked about the relationship between the board and the global organization.
Is the Secretary-General of the view that the Board of Peace itself undermines the work of the United Nations? Is this a competing organisation?
There have been any number
of organizations, regional organizations, defense alliances, and others that have coexisted with the UN over the 80 years that the UN's been in existence. It's too early to tell what the Board of Peace will look like. One thing we are aware of is, of course, that the Security Council has endorsed the Board of Peace strictly for the work on Gaza. And of course, we continue to abide by that resolution. What happens in the future, we'll have to see.
Trump has criticized the UN as ineffective, but said he still believed in what he described as its unrealized potential.
Do you want your Board of Peace to replace the UN?
Well, it might. I mean, the UN just hasn't been very helpful. I'm a big fan of the UN potential, but it has never lived up to its potential. The UN should have settled every one of the wars that I settled. I never went to them. I never even thought to go to them. They should be able to settle those wars. They don't. I believe you got to let the UN continue because the potential is so great.
Board member Jared Kushner said for now he is focused on the next phase of the Gaza ceasefire deal. It would address funding for reconstruction in the territory, which lies mostly in ruins, as well as disarmament by Gaza's dominant Palestinian militant group Hamas, one of the most intractable unresolved issues.
Number one thing is going to be security. Obviously, we've been working very closely with the Israelis to figure out a way through de-escalation. And the next phase is working with Hamas on demilitarization, which I'll talk about in a second. But without security, nobody's going to make investments. Nobody's going to come, build there. We need investments in order to start giving jobs.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he accepted an invitation to join the Board of Peace. Meanwhile, Palestinian factions have also endorsed Trump's Gaza peace plan and given backing to a transitional Palestinian committee meant to administer the Gaza Strip with oversight by the Board of Peace.
And that was Reuters' Alex Cohen ending that report. It is 12:51 Central African time. And before we speak to the upside, let's take a quick break.
This is Channel Africa.
The whole population of Africa has been shocked to the depth of its soul.
For 60 years, Channel Africa has been the voice that connects the continent, telling our stories and sharing our vision with the world. This year, we mark 6 decades of broadcast excellence.
60 years of stories, sound, and connection.
6 years of African conversations that matter.
This is 60 years of broadcast excellence.
Broadcast excellence, rooted in Africa's heartbeat and looking boldly into the future. Join Channel Africa as we celebrate 60 years of broadcasting. Still strong, still vibrant, and still giving you the African perspective.
Channel Africa.
Africa Update. Lulu Gaboo, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
We say happy Friday and good afternoon to Dobokole Kuleni, who is on the MSC. And you're out at sea. What's happening? We haven't been able to speak to you the whole week, and we're seeing the visuals, the pictures, and everything. Talk to us.
Listen, it's been amazing. Unfortunately, we're not at sea today. We are at the Durban Harbour because today is the final day. We got off the ship this morning very early. In fact, we had to get off the ship around 8 o'clock this morning. But we are now in the terminal so we can get through this broadcast. And in this terminal is where thousands and thousands of people walk through to get their passports checked and stamped before they get into that big ship. Right now, it's getting ready for another voyage. So it dropped us off and a new group of people is about to onboard it, and they are going to head off onto the Indian Ocean again for another voyage. But here's what's coming up on the upside this afternoon. We get into conversation with Ugandan stand-up comedian Don Andre. He'll be joining us online, and then we are joined by DJ Lane in the studio as a producer and a DJ who'll be providing us with our DJ mix this afternoon, and then multi-award winning artist Lady Zama will be joining us also online on the upside. That's all coming up, and of course I'll be sharing what's happening here in Durban, so don't go anywhere.
That's the upside coming up at the top of the hour with Tebogo Kuleni and Matseko Musito. Well, we continue on Africa Update, and there is a lot still coming up on the show before we wrap up.
Keep Africa in your hands. Connect to our website for all your news, sports, and cultural updates. channelafrica.co.za.
Africa Update with Lulu Gaboo, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
Join us in conversation on our social media platforms. That's on X, Instagram, and subscribe on YouTube at Channel Africa 1, on Facebook at Channel Africa. You can also send us your comments and voice notes on +27 83 288 6684. And you can, well, that's hashtag Africa Update. And today on hashtag Africa Update Us, the African Union is moving closer to restoring Guinea's membership nearly 4 years after suspending the country following a military coup. Now, we want to know, do you think this is a good move for the AU and the country, Guinea? Share your thoughts and your views on all our social media platforms. That's on X, Instagram at Channel Africa 1, on Facebook at Channel Africa. You can also send us your comments and voice notes on +27 83 288 6684. Hashtag Africa Update Us.
Africa Update on Channel Africa.
Our South African social media experts are calling for stricter regulation on how sensitive content is shared online during tragic events. They warn that unverified or graphic material can circulate too quickly, causing harm to families and communities. Recent incidents including a minibus scholar transport crash in the Vaal and the death of DJ Waras show how quickly images and videos can spread before loved ones are informed. Experts say stricter oversight and responsible sharing are urgently needed to protect those affected. Calvin Mabasa has more.
Recently, South Africans have mourned the death of prominent media personality Warwick Stock, better known as DJ Waras, who was shot and killed in Johannesburg last month. In a separate tragedy on Monday near Van Nabeel Park, a scholar transport vehicle collided with a truck, claiming the lives of 14 school children. Disturbing images and videos of the victims circulated widely online before families had been informed. Gauteng Education spokesperson Steve Mabona says this not only adds to the family's grief, but also spreads misinformation and causes further trauma.
We are grieving. They are generating posters utilizing AI. Meanwhile, families are grieving. We are giving a different picture altogether, circulating graphics that are not accurate. We are using AI just for probably social media or for content reasons.
Clinical psychologist Leseho Lekwatani warns that the mental and emotional impact of seeing such content online can be serious, especially for families directly affected by tragedy. Lekwatani says seeing images can intensify grief and make it harder to process the loss.
Research has actually found that you can experience PTSD symptoms just from, looking at the content online. And so you can have things like intrusive thoughts, you can have things like flashbacks, you can have things like nightmares about the content. So to come across content like that when you're just scrolling unexpectedly is, it's incredibly traumatic, and it's impersonal because it's not coming from someone who is within the family or someone who is supposed to be sharing those news. But then I think with the grieving process as well, when there is the constant re-exposure to those images, it keeps that event alive in a way.
Media experts say the problem goes beyond artificial intelligence, with untrained users posting sensitive content under the guise of citizen journalism. University of Johannesburg's Dr. Sanele Gamede says the pressure to be first often outweighs consideration around ethics and the dignity of victims.
I think it's becoming a little bit dangerous, especially at the hands of people who do not know what they're doing, at the hands of people who are not trained and don't understand the consequences of publishing anything. It could be a story, it could be a video. People are just posting content. In fact, I don't even know whether we do have the word citizen journalism anymore.
Experts say it is not only the responsibility of social media platforms, but also of every user to pause, verify, and consider the consequences before sharing sensitive content online. Calvin Mabasa in Johannesburg.
And that's how we wrap Africa Update today and for the week. It's been a great week on Africa Update. Continue with us on all our social media platforms and be safe and have a great weekend. We'll do this again on Monday. Bye-bye.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet. Channel 628.
Well, a big thank you to Lulu Gaboo and team. Join her again on Monday, same time, same place. It's now time for The Upside as we end our voyage at sea this afternoon. Day 5 of our MSC adventure comes to an end, and we'll be broadcasting from the terminal here at the Durban Harbour, where people are coming in to stamp their passports to get on board. There's another voyage that's getting ready to disembark, to leave and go to the Indian Ocean. But before we get into our festivities of The Upside,
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Teboho. In your latest news this hour, the African Union is moving closer to restoring Guinea's membership. This nearly 4 years after suspending the country following a military coup. At a meeting in Addis Ababa, AU Commission chairperson Muhammad Ali Yusuf recommended lifting the suspension, saying Guinea has reached a key milestone in its political transition with the new constitution and presidential elections. A senior analyst at Control Risk, Beverly Ochieng, explains.
For the African Union, the fact that Guinea did hold an election, the presidential election that took place in December, means that this marks the end of it being under a junta interim government to a more elected democratic government, even though there have been disputes from the opposition around the conduct of that election. The result was quite decisive, with Dumbuya getting more than 70% of the vote. It is a symbolic change, him moving from just being a leader of a junta to being a president, which means that they can politically re-engage with him. And for the most part, we have seen that the biggest pressure point for countries under military-led government is a constitutional handover of power.
The Director General of the Africa Centre for Disease Control and Prevention, Africa CDC, is warning of the possibility of a cholera outbreak in Mozambique following recent floods in the country. 13 people have died in the floods that have also displaced thousands and caused major damage to infrastructure. Africa CDC head Jean Kaseya was addressing the media on the ongoing public health emergencies on the continent.
We saw this flooding in most of the Southern African countries. Flooding means next cholera outbreak. We are ready. From today, we start to activate our Emergency Operations Center and to see how we support our countries. This is also an opportunity for us to say all actions and decisions we made to control cholera in Africa must be implemented now.
A private social worker has told the East London Magistrate Court in the